Ladies and gentlemen, I am SidAlpha. Since its first inception in March of 2013, the Early Access program has been racked with a wide range of difficulties. From developers that get in over their heads to companies that run out of money to outright scams, the Early Access program itself having a success rate of under 30%, not to mention its own set of problems as far as gaming is concerned in general. More often than not, a game will have reached the end of its life cycle before it ever reaches a final market release, meaning the vast majority of the people who had paid for the game would never even see, much less play, the completed version. Now, compounding the issues that Early Access has brought to the gaming community, crowdfunding as a method of launching new games was also introduced. This allows developers without deep pockets who have a concept interesting enough to catch the eye of a fan base to be able to get their project funded without having to seek out a publisher. Now, such a process has led to a great many successful campaigns over the last few years and shows no sign of slowing, with projects like Star Citizen currently exceeding $130 million of crowdfunded income. The industry has proven qualitatively that people can and will pay for the simple idea of a game alone, sight unseen. Of course, this leads us to Starforge, a futuristic survival game crowdfunded on Indiegogo by a small indie dev group that went by the name Codehatch Games back in 2012. Starforge was one of the few games lucky enough to develop a fair amount of interest, and owing to that budding interest in what Starforge was promising to offer, it officially launched its Indiegogo campaign in October of 2012, nearly doubling its $75,000 goal, which, to my mind, should have been the first sign of concern, as this was yet another game along the vein of Star Citizen that was promising to be a little bit of everything. Part first-person shooter and part procedurally generated open-world survival, the game claimed to borrow elements from real-time strategy, first-person shooter, role-playing game, voxel builder, tower defense, and the physics sandbox genres, not to mention both multiplayer and single-player modes, all of which is an extremely tall order for a mere $135,000. Now, such a game, to my mind again, would be more than likely to require a budget of $500,000 or more, but I've seen a great deal done with very little, so it is a distinct possibility, or I should say was. Now, shortly after the successful Indiegogo campaign, troubled waters began to rear its ugly head in but a few short months. In December of 2012, Codehatch released their first large update introducing procedural generation to the game, amongst a fair amount of other new additions, and it appeared that Starforge was on track and on task. And then, silence. Codehatch, apparently writing the code of conduct later to be emulated by Hello Games, went full radio silence, not responding on any social media or even their own forums to backers and fans, all clamoring for some shred of information as to the game's progress. All cries for some form of communication ultimately fell on deaf ears until out of nowhere the game suddenly appeared on Steam's Early Access platform in March of 2013. Now, all was troublesome, as nearly zero information of any import was relayed to the backers of the game until early 2014, where suddenly patch release versions came in rapid-fire succession, building towards a 1.0 release of the game in record time. Giant swaths of promised features were written off completely, and several features present but unfinished within the game were outright removed. Now, this, of course, caused an uproar as fans recognized a troubled development cycle when they saw it. To compound the issues, Codehatch promptly and without any prior warning or notice to the backers fired all or most of their experienced developers, instead hiring green talent with little to no experience at all. Codehatch then labeled the very much unfinished game as feature complete late 2014, and the game has languished, having no meaningful support or updates to the game since that time. Rating at an over 80% negative on Steam, fans were rightfully and justifiably furious over the state of the game. Adding insult to injury over the insulting cash grab mentality that Codehatch under Will Swarren exhibited, the fans were delivered one final slap in the face after being pounded in the proverbial poop chute for the trouble of backing Codehatch's game. This took the form of Will Swarren announcing on January 26th of this year that the completely and utterly abandoned title would be released as a DRM-free version on their website and removed from Steam January 27th, which was promptly done. This, of course, led to righteous fury on the part of those that had paid good money for the buggy, broken mess that Codehatch claimed was a feature-complete game. essentially leaving the vast majority of backers feeling that not only did they not get what they were paid for or promised, but also that they had felt completely and utterly scammed. Now, the insult, unfortunately, doesn't end there. Codehatch also has another product on Steam labeled Reign of Kings, reportedly utilizing the vast majority of assets from Starforge in a reskinned medieval fashion. This other broken mess of a game is overrun by hackers, and Codehatch, having made all of the money they most likely feel they can possibly make from a reskinned clone of Starforge, have been reported as fully setting their sights on abandoning that title as well, although both assertions have been denied outright by Codehatch themselves. The actions of Will Sworn and Codehatch Games is beyond reprehensible, failing to even attempt on delivering the vast majority of promised features and completely ignoring their consumers and their justified complaints, and then abandoning a game that the now disenfranchised consumer base had backed in good faith is about as completely and utterly disgusting as I can think of. These developers deserve to go bankrupt and have their business run into the ground, and considering their very public anti-consumer actions, I feel they will have done just that. The gaming community will not trust Codehatch to hold a pile of shit with both hands, let alone trust them with even a single solitary dollar after this monumental horseshit they plop down at the feet of the gaming community. This development team, in some ways, rivals Digital Homicide in amoral ambivalence towards their own consumers and complete and utter lack of character. Remember Starforge, ladies and gentlemen. Remember Reign of Kings, as I'm certain it will soon follow. This very much illustrates the dangers of early access and the very real risk that crowdfunding provides, because there are a lot more Will Sworns and James Romines in the world than I would care to admit. Scum, greedy, and shady enough to do whatever it takes to maximize profit with little to no effort. Codehatch and Digital Homicide merely had different methods to go about duping people out of their money, but don't for 1 second believe that they are in any way dissimilar to each other. Be careful when backing crowdfunded projects. Make sure you're never investing more than you can afford to simply wad up and throw into the bin, as that is the ever-present risk in backing unfinished products, because for every pillar of eternity out there, there are 3 Starforges waiting in the wings. Some will fail out of incompetence or circumstance, but some will deliberately fail, pocketing the money and leaving the consumer high and dry. Unfortunately, there are no real legal repercussions for Codehatch Games or for Will Sworn, but I desperately hope that someday soon there will be. If anyone deserves legal punishment, it would be them. So there it is, the trials and tribulations of Starforge that every backer of the game ended up facing. It was a nightmare scenario within the early access and crowdfunding programs that are now an all too common sight within the games industry. Please do spread the word of this video by hitting those like and share buttons. After all, an informed consumer is a consumer with power. If you're new to the channel, feel free to hit that subscribe button if you liked what you saw and heard. It does help more than you know. Also, if you would like to support the channel even further, you can do so by throwing $1 at my Patreon. Link to that in the description below. Thanks so much for watching. Once again, I am SidAlpha, and I will see you next time.